Welcome, IG Live. How you doing, Robin?
Good.
Did you watch right now? I think Falchi was testifying at Congress.
A little bit. I was on the phone though.
Anything? Do you know of anything? Did he say anything interesting?
I'm sure he did, but I wasn't paying attention.
You know what I would like to know? I would like to see a timeline of every decision the WHO or CDC has made about masks.
Right.
Because
daily, right?
Yeah, and by the way, I'm not criticizing them. Like, at first, let's just assume the CDC and the WHO are one big organization. So at first they said, don't use masks. And I get it. It's because they thought they were going to run out of masks for the doctors and healthcare workers. So, like anybody who's manipulative, they thought they had to lie to get what they want. They couldn't just say, don't use masks because we need doctors to use it. Because maybe they were afraid then people would start, hoarding masks. Like, remember at the beginning of the whole pandemic, people were literally, like, down the street, Upper West Side of New York, 2 women were fighting on the floor at Trader Joe's for a roll of toilet paper.
Right.
Like, people were that scared they were going to run out of toilet paper. Like, that's how quickly, like, it took just a week for people to turn into, like, what they think is respectable adults. Mm-hmm. And it could never happen here, sort of thinking, right. They turn into basically animals on the floor in public, fighting over toilet paper. That would never be me. And yet, people should realize, I'm not making fun of those women. That's any of us. Like, some survival instinct, kicks in, and we turn into what humans were just 50,000 years ago. Can't see me. There we are. Most humans, I think something like 30% of humans that they find the bones from 50, 60,000 years ago, most humans die from, like, some violent... Yeah. They could see, there was like an arrow stuck in this person, or there was some broken bones, most people die from some violent behavior. So the body, the mind has not evolved at all in the past 50,000 years. We've got the same brains we had 50,000 years ago, but society now has Whole Foods, has Trader Joe's, has bookstores. So in order to eat sugar 50,000 years ago, it was difficult. Nothing was, it was rare to have some sweet food. Even the food that we eat now that's sweet is genetically modified. Watermelons, even when I was a kid, watermelons had seeds in them. Now they don't. And 50,000 years ago, watermelons only had very small amounts of the fruit in them. You had to kind of really dig hard in the watermelon to find the fruit. So now, again, the brain hasn't evolved, so when we see sweets, we just can't stop eating because the brain says, oh my gosh, this is the last time you're going to see sweets maybe in your entire life. You better eat all of the chocolate that you can right away. And so the brain just doesn't stop. And that's the reason, like, we get addicted to these things, like, because our mind thinks, this feels so good, I'm not going to get this again. So we become addicts for sweets or drugs or food or whatever. So it's so easy to kind of go back into that primitive spot. And you see it on Twitter now. Like, everyone is, everyone's basically a maniac. Like, people basically want financial security, or, meaning they don't have to worry about whether they're going to be poor again, or they want intellectual security. They want people to think that they're smart and that their opinion should be respected, or they want emotional security. They want to be with, a spouse that they can trust and who's going to help them to feel good about themselves and so on. So they want those 3 things. And if they don't get them, like if you don't get intellectual security from your close group, you end up being an anonymous person on Twitter screaming at the president or Joe Biden or other people who you could just attack and attack and attack, and you get all your intellectual security needs from that. And if you don't have financial security, then you could basically say, well, Jeff Bezos needs to share all his money. It's not fair that the guy who created Amazon, that I order all of my belongings from and get delivered right to my door, the guy who created that all for me needs to share all of his money. And maybe he should. I'm not arguing politically, but that's if if you're really financially insecure, you start taking it out against people who are better off. And if you're emotionally insecure, you get more desperate for relationships. You outsource your self-esteem to like if we were to just start dating, you would be my mirror, and I would look to you to determine how I should feel about myself. And if you started to feel less about me, then I would get nervous, and I would get jealous, and I would get insecure, and that would drive you further away, so I would get more insecure. And so all of those things have a positive, and all of those things have a negative. Like, better to be secure, but if you're insecure, that tends to be what happens.
So it's really all about belonging and survival.
Yes. So like the financial security and emotional security, and even the intellectual security is about survival. You get you get accepted into the tribe, and you get closer and closer to being the alpha of the tribe. And if you're insecure, you get the cortisol spiking, like, oh my gosh, the tribe's going to reject me. I need to lash out. I need to be the leaders of the people who want billionaire money, or I need to like trash all the intellectually superior people on Twitter or Instagram or TikTok, or I need to, beg my spouse, like, you promised you would love me, and, if you don't, I'm going to cry all the time. Look, I've been there in almost every relationship of my life, so it's amazing I haven't been there with you, where I'm at the point of suicide when a girl turns away from me. So, going to I want to talk about some business models. What do you think?
All right, sounds good.
Anybody have a business idea they want to pitch right here? You are an alpha when you're a parent of children, and then they become the alphas. That's true sometimes. Sometimes the kid alphas treat you like shit. So, but
stay alpha.
Hi, James. Favorite Angela Davis book? I don't know. Isn't Angela Davis? Wasn't she the socialist? She was in jail for a while for killing somebody. I don't know. I don't have a favorite Angela Davis book, so I'm not sure. Hey there. All right, I'm gonna answer some questions. Text me at 203-590-8607 if you have questions, or you can ask questions there and Jay will track them. But I'm gonna answer my text questions first. So let's see. So this person is studying for the California State Bar exam to be a lawyer, but her dream is to be a romance novelist like Danielle Steele and Jackie Collins. Should I give up being a lawyer and just focus on my writing? Although the exam is just a couple months away, what is the future of lawyers? Okay, a bunch of questions there. First is, let's just talk macro. What's the future of lawyers? We use lawyers.
Oh yeah, no, I believe definitely there's a future. But she went through law school the 3 years. I'd say go ahead and do it, and that's the way she has it. She has her trade, and she can keep it and then write. But don't give up now.
So take the law exam, pass it. So my good friend Bill Batiste, been on my podcast a couple of times. He went to law school, and he hated the law and decided not to be a lawyer. He's a comedian, which is a very poor career choice for someone who went to law school. And he's also been a dating coach, another very poor career choice for someone who went to law school. But he combined his three skills of lawyer, dating coach, comedian to create a course on what he calls frame control, which is persuasion, and he's doing very well with that. I helped him set that up, actually. But did he take the bar exam even though he knew he didn't want to be a lawyer? Of course he did. And get that law degree, get past the bar exam. Always have that in the back pocket, because unfortunately to charge practicing law, you have to have a law you have to be a licensed lawyer, and you only get that way in most U.S. states if you take the bar exam. There are a few states, like I think Utah, and I think even New York or New Jersey, where if you apprentice for a law firm for like a year or two, you can take the bar exam without going to law school. Right. But you still have to take the bar exam.
Also, with a law degree, you can be a broker in real estate, and you don't.
Really?
Yeah.
You don't get a real estate broker's license?
No, I don't think so. I think being a lawyer, you can be a broker because they cover all of that.
And if you have a law degree, you can also be, who's the guy who approves everything? Like
you mean like a signature?
Yeah. He says, I was here. This is my stamp.
Yeah. It's a notary.
Notary. You could be a notary public with a law degree. So, but I think you never know. And like you said, you've already paid for the law degree. Unfortunately, maybe you shouldn't have paid for the law degree. You're already in debt from that. But here's what I would do. It's very hard to just quit your job and career and just jump into something new. Because not only then do you have to learn the skills of being a romance novelist, but you have fear. You have, every day you wake up and you'll think, am I making the right choice? You're gonna rent mental real estate to this fear. Did I make a right choice? What if I don't know what I'm doing? What if the book doesn't sell? So here's what I would do. I would get the law, license, take the bar exam. Maybe you could even take on small cases, open up a little law firm in your home. Just take enough cases to pay the bills. By the way, I'll just tangent for a second. I think a very interesting business idea is to create a website where people could crowdsource law questions. So for instance, let's say I get a parking ticket in Pennsylvania and I can post, here's my parking ticket, here's what happened, here's the documents, is there any way I can contest this? And the crowd answers for you based on their own experiences, knowledge. Maybe someone's a retired lawyer and you're willing to, and let's say I'm willing to pay $100 for the answer, so it's like a reverse auction, so maybe a retired lawyer's answer. But anyway, I think this is a good idea for a business, crowd legal, whatever you want to call it. And if you're a lawyer, you could set this up and you could approve all the law cases that are coming in. You need a lawyer to kind of approve which cases will be answered by the crowd. Anyway, that's a side thing. There you go. And but then absolutely spend an hour a day, just write. So Graham Greene is a famous British novelist. He wrote a lot of thrillers, mysteries type books. He did this for like 30 or 40 years. I think he wrote 50 books, 100 books, something like that. He would just write 500 words a day, sometimes 1,000 words a day. He would generate one solid novel a year, and he did that for like 40 or 50 years. So what I would do is, the romance genre is a very, very specific formula. And I'm sure there are many, not only are there books about the exact formula for a lawyer, and I think if my friend Sean Coyne, who's he works with Stephen Pressfield, he writes a lot about writing. So Sean Coyne has a book or a course called The Story Grid. He outlines beat by beat the exact romance genre. That's Sean Coyne. Coyne is his last name. Sean, I think is his first name, or Shawn, I forget. And we're obviously not good friends. And but also even Harlequin Romance, they have on their website, you can download the formula beat by beat, what you need in a romance novelist. And of course you can read all the Danielle Steele novels. You can take notes. Okay, when does the female meet the male hero? When does she start to hate him? When does she start to like him? What's the problem in the middle that keeps them apart after their first affair? And then how do they get back together and live life happily ever after? So you could study the genre and then just start writing 300 words a day, 500 words a day. The key is, do not ever look back at what you wrote the day before, unless it's just to catch up your memory. Don't even think about rewriting until you finish the first draft. And just 500 words a day. The average Harlequin Romance, I believe, is about 40,000 words, and they're very specific. They tell you this on their website. So maybe start off with a Harlequin Romance, or maybe start off self-publishing. I know many people who have self-published romance novels and have done very well with just self-publishing, hundreds of thousands of copies and of their books sold. And how do they do that? Well, I'll tell you how E.L. James did it. So E.L. James, if you remember, she wrote a little book called 50 Shades of Grey, which is, of course, a romance novel or a soft porn novel. But here's what she did. She didn't just write it from scratch. She participated in fan groups for Twilight, the movie series and the book series Twilight. And she wrote fan fiction for Twilight, and she developed up to 1.5 million followers on fan fiction sites. There's a site, I think, even called fanfiction.net. I think she wrote for that. She had 1.4 million followers, and someone said to her, "This is so good, why don't you write it up as a book?" So she switched all the names, she took out the vampire stuff, and she replaced the vampire with the billionaire, and she called it 50 Shades of Grey. And guess what? She self-published. We think now, oh, she must have published with Simon & Schuster. No, they all rejected her book. She self-published. She sold right away about 250,000 copies because she had this fan base. And then she pitched her book to Amazon. Amazon runs their own publishing companies. Amazon rejected it, even though she had sold 250,000 copies. And so I think it was Random House picked it up. And there was one period, I think this was in 2013 or 2014, she was selling 1 out of every 3 books sold in the world on the planet was 50 Shades of Grey.
Wow.
And she started off self-published. She started off writing fan fiction on some random internet group, and then she just did the formula for a romance novel. And I've read the book. It's interesting to read. It is not a well-written book, but she has the formula down perfectly. I would love to write in such a formulaic way. It's more difficult than you think. Study the formula, write every day, and not most importantly, but this is an important thing that writers have to do now, which they did not have to do 50 years ago. You have to participate in Facebook groups, on fan sites, and so on about writing, and about join a Danielle Steele fan Facebook group and start commenting and answering questions and writing on those groups every day. Go on Quora, answer questions about the romance genre every day. So spend an hour every day writing and spend an hour every day building up social media. And people say, to be fair, I get it. Some people don't like social media. So one person wrote me and said, "I don't want to be a social media whore. Is there any other way to break into writing?" Unfortunately, how much money you make writing is directly correlated to your social media presence, at least in the beginning. So you have to do all the social media stuff. Find as many fan groups for your genre as you can, participate them, write 300 to 500 words a day, and then figure out how you can put in the minimal hours per day as a lawyer that you can. Maybe just take on, I don't know, what are they called, probate cases, or maybe I have one friend, she's doing okay, she's just doing adoption cases. So parents hear about her through word of mouth, and she's just doing adoption cases. She'll do at any given point, she's got 2 or 3 cases. They'll pay her decent money per hour, and she's a lawyer, so she could do it. And that's how I would do it. So I will just say, for me, I kept and you probably know this, I kept my full-time job for 18 months after I started doing my side hustle. It's always good to diversify what you're doing so no one thing stresses you. Even when I was a day trader, I was also a writer, and then I started a hedge fund, and then I would write books, and then I would write for the Financial Times, and then I would do speaking gigs. It's always spoke and wheel approach. You have the wheel and then lots of spokes. In this case, romance fiction is the wheel, and you have weird spokes like doing lawyer stuff, but you want the spokes ideally to come out of the wheel. They don't always do it, but if doing a few hours as a lawyer helps pay for the hour you spend learning the romance genre or the 2 hours you spend on social media, then it's worth it. So, anything? Do you ever read a romance novel?
No, I don't like them personally. I just like books that I can, learn something from.
So you like nonfiction books?
Yeah.
You don't really like novels that much.
No.
I want to write a thriller novel. My next serious hardcore book, I really want it to be a thriller novel. And I'll just tell you flat out, you should never talk about the plot before you write something. Like the fact that I'm about to talk a plot idea means I probably won't write it. But what do you think of this idea? So I've had on a lot of podcast guests that are very interesting people. I've had on a diverse group. So I've had on a lot of thriller novelists also. And I've also had on ex-Navy SEALs, I've had on ex-CIA people. And I found out that there's quite a few of them have one thing in common. They've all been asked by the government in the mid-00s to join, like in 2007, 2008, to join a top secret group made up of thriller novelists and science fiction novelists to brainstorm ideas for how terrorists can attack the United States. And if I ever ask them, well, tell me some of the ideas you came up with, they say, oh, I can't. It's top secret. They got top secret clearance to do this. But it's amazing how it's at least 5 people who've been on my podcast who have all told me they belonged to this group. But I've had on like some of the best, thriller writers on the planet. Like I've had on Ken Follett, I've had on Brad Meltzer, I've had on Brad Thor, Alex Berenson, who's getting famous for his coronavirus tweets. And they a lot of these guys, plus some other professions, have this in common. So I want to do a plot where there's this secret group of people who have to plan, who have to brainstorm possible terrorist attacks so the U.S. could learn how to respond, and they start going missing one at a time. And anyway, I won't give any more of the plot, but I think that's an interesting idea. So I'll go to another question. By the way, I definitely approve of the idea of writing romance novels. I think those are addictive. I love them, and it's a great genre. People think just because something's a genre book that it's low quality, but if you compare like a bad legal thriller, and I won't mention any names, but there's a whole genre of legal thrillers. Compare those books with a John Grisham legal thriller, and you'll see John Grisham is a great writer. He's not a literary writer. He's not going to write like your favorite literary writer, but he is a great. There's no holes in the plot. They're page turners. You could read a 400-page John Grisham novel in a plane ride to California, and he's just brilliant. If you could write 1/10 as good as him, you'll write better than almost any other legal thriller writer out there. Next question. But thank you for that question. That's a good question. Let's see. Okay, so I wrote an article yesterday about the ways, if you've seen the movie 8 Mile, I wrote an article about the 12 cognitive biases that Eminem uses to manipulate the audience in a rap battle that he's in the movie. He wants to manipulate the audience to like him more than his opponent, who's this guy called Papa Doc. And so cognitive biases are shortcuts that the brain takes to make decisions. And usually they're fine. Usually your cognitive biases are correct. I won't go into the whole thing on cognitive biases. Maybe we could do that in another episode. I've covered this on my podcast a lot. At least 2 people on my podcast have written books about cognitive biases. But if you know and are aware of cognitive biases, you can use them to potentially manipulate people in critical situations. So I write about an article describing cognitive biases, and I use this example from Eminem. One of the examples I use, I wonder if you've ever heard this story. So Benjamin Franklin, when he was a young member of the Pennsylvania state legislature, he had an enemy. There was a politician, another member of the legislature, who hated him, hated Benjamin Franklin. So if Benjamin Franklin proposed a law, this guy would just shoot it down. So kind of like the Democrats and Republicans right now. So things don't change, by the way. Everybody says, oh, I've never seen America so divisive. Trust me, the Civil War, people were more divisive. I mean, in 1858, I think it was, one senator tried to beat to death another senator right in the Senate. So we've been divisive before. But anyway, Benjamin Franklin had this enemy, and he wanted to turn this enemy into a friend. So he used a very interesting technique, and it's actually now called the Benjamin Franklin effect, or the Benjamin Franklin bias. It's a cognitive bias. He knew that his enemy who was very proud of his book collection. So he went up to his enemy and he said, can I borrow XYZ book? And his enemy was surprised, like, oh, okay, yeah. And so his enemy brought in the book, lent it to Benjamin Franklin. A week later, I don't even know if Benjamin Franklin read it, but a week later, Benjamin Franklin returned the book and just said thanks. That was it. That guy was Benjamin Franklin's friend for life. He never again went against any Benjamin Franklin bill at all. So what happened? What happened there? Why was
Trust.
It's a trust and it's a bonding. But what really happened is that your brain. The problem with the brain is your brain is actually very stupid. So the brain looks at your actions and then figures out what the actions mean. Actions happen before thoughts.
Right.
So the brain is looking at the brain of the enemy is saying, I am the sort of person who lends books to Ben Franklin. So that means I must like him, I must trust him, and he must be my friend. So the cognitive bias is the brain takes over then, and now the enemy can't be the enemy anymore because the brain says, no, you can't be the enemy. You're the type of person who lends Benjamin Franklin books. And so that's the Benjamin Franklin bias. And so, so somebody just asked me via my phone, via SMS, someone just asked me, is that relevant? How do you use that cognitive bias now? Because I would not go up to someone and say, usually, hey, can I borrow this hardcover book? Because people read books on the Kindle, for instance, or it's easy for you to just get the book. Back then, it wasn't so easy to build up a book collection, but now you can just go to the bookstore and buy a book for $10 or whatever, or you can go to Kindle and get the book for cheaper. So what would be a relevant way? Like, let's say you had an enemy right now, what could you maybe borrow from them?
Do you have to borrow, or can you do something else?
You have to get them to do a favor for you. You have to get them to do something nice to you. Because then the cognitive bias is the brain then convinces you that since you were nice to this person some way, you now like them, and then then you treat them nicely.
It reminds me of that, the saying that your actions are so loud that it's hard for me to hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right? Because
are you telling that to me?
No, I just like that saying because people, you can tell what they are really thinking by their actions because it's easy just to say words, but if you actually watch what they do, you won't understand where they are.
Right. So that's the saying, watch what I do, not what I say.
Exactly.
And so that tells you who the real person is. And this is one step further.
So you're trying to make them do what you want.
Right.
So it's turning there.
Right. And usually people think, oh, I want to get someone to like me, I'll lend them a book. Hey, you might like this book. Please like me. Here's the book. But usually then people are like, ugh, this guy's pandering to me. Right. I hate him even more.
Right.
So it's the reverse of what you would normally think. It's counterintuitive that if you ask someone to do a favor for you, it actually makes their brain it's hard to say no to the favor. And so they do the action, and then the brain is looking at the action to determine how they're going to treat the person in the future.
So I do that with the kids.
So what do you do?
I have them do things. Like I say, I need you to go to the grocery store and get us something, or do me a favor, go do this. And they do it.
Yeah.
So, I guess they don't really kind of want to, but they do.
And so then the idea would be, is that turns them into more likely to do favors for you in the future.
Right, and for other people.
Okay, so basically, that's almost slightly different but let's say your kid hates you, but you ask them to do a favor and they do the favor for you. Right. So if your kid hates you and you do a favor for them, they're probably going to hate you more.
That's right.
They're probably going to think, oh my gosh,
he's so easy.
Yeah, it's so easy to manipulate my parents. Guess what I got my mom to get me the other day.
Right.
But if you ask them to do a favor for you, then they're more inclined to be nicer to you later, and because they think to themselves, their brain thinks, oh, I'm the type of person who's a good daughter, or a good son.
Right.
But let's say it's in a sales context, like you're gonna go meet someone for a sales meet, you're gonna try to sell them something, or let's say you just have an enemy in the Pennsylvania state legislature. What's a technique you can do?
I don't know. I mean, if you're gonna meet with somebody, maybe say, oh, can I borrow your pen, or can I, ask to borrow something while you're there with them, or may I use your phone, or
you could ask them out for lunch, and you could let them pay for it, or you could say, hey, I don't know, that's a little trickier to do that. Like then it seems.
Maybe I don't know if you don't know them very well. I mean, just ask to use something. Do you mind if I use your pen, or I don't know. I guess you start small.
Yeah, well, so Benjamin Franklin started with a book, which is medium small, because again, books were rare then. So it can't be so small that it's nothing, because your brain has to think, this is big enough that I must like the person. So a pen is not quite big enough that they think that they'll like the person.
Or if you like maybe honestly what they're wearing, or oh, I love that. Where did you get that? I mean, so they're actually giving you
they're giving you advice.
Right.
So okay, so here's how I would do it in a modern context: is I would ask for advice from them. So let's say you have an enemy. I would write them, but it's an enemy that you communicate with, like Ben Franklin was able to communicate with this guy. I would figure out something to ask them for advice about. Like, hey, if you were me, how would you handle this? Like, let's say it's a sales meeting, or let's say you're asking your boss for a raise. I would say to my boss, so let's say the boss is going to say something like, well, I don't know, budgets have been cut, how much of a raise do you think you need? I don't know. I would say to the boss, okay, look, I've been so busy working. You're right. I don't really think about these things. You're the expert at this, and you've been through this, and you're more experienced. If you were me, what should I ask for? How should I approach this? How should I get a raise? And asking them for advice gives them status, and then when they give your advice, it's the same effect. Their brain thinks to them, oh, I'm the type of person who gives James advice about how he can ask for a raise. He's trusting me, he's giving me status. I don't want to ruin that status, and I am this type of person who people come to for advice, so I don't want to give bad advice. And then I think that's a good, easy way to do the Benjamin Franklin technique. Because you're right, it's harder. When's the last time you borrowed an object from somebody?
Right.
Like, I never go to my neighbor like, oh, can I borrow some sugar? Like, I never really... Everything is like so accessible. Like Amazon, you hit a button and Amazon, delivers it like 30 seconds later. And now there's this is just related to this. I'm gonna tangent for a second into business models. There's something called e-commerce, but there's also something you're gonna start to hear more and more of called a-commerce, automated commerce. So this is when you think of Amazon Prime, like, oh, I want this book. Amazon Prime delivers it to you the next day. And it's sort of a joke that we've heard, but like pretty soon, Americans want things so fast. Pretty soon Amazon's going to deliver yesterday. So there's a comedian, Ronnie Chang, who has a whole joke around this. But it's actually true. With automated commerce, maybe your refrigerator sees, oh, I'm getting low on milk, and it orders automatically from Amazon or the local grocery store, and they deliver before you even realize you need it. Or let's say you have something in your closet. You're running low on. Oh no, your Fitbit sees that you've just walked 50,000 steps in the same pair of socks. So your Fitbit orders socks for you. So it delivers because your socks are getting worn out, and Fitbit knows it. So it orders your socks before you even realize you need it. So automated commerce, maybe here's our printer. Maybe automated commerce realizes, oh, we're getting low on. Isn't it the most annoying thing when the ink? You only realize you're low on ink. You never think about, oh, am I low on ink? You always realize you're low on ink when it just shows up shitty.
Teenagers.
Right, because they're using it, they don't care. And so if the printer orders, it has some AI and it orders ink when you're running low. So e-commerce is going to be a huge industry, and it's going to be connected to the Internet of Things. Like your lights will know when the light bulbs are burning out.
I think they already have that, don't they?
Maybe, I don't even know.
Yeah, I think so.
Your Fitbit will know things about you. Maybe your Fitbit will know if your back is not straight. And so it'll say, hey, you should go to the doctor and check for scoliosis. Or maybe it'll order you a back brace.
Maybe a massage.
Or maybe it'll order you a massage and set up the appointment. Or maybe it'll just remind you, hey, stand up straight. By the way, Fitbit doesn't currently do this. Product idea: make a Fitbit that does this. That because back posture.
When you do it,
back posture. We're so used to just leaning over our computers and typing all day long that all of our back postures are pretty bad. Unless you're like some 5th degree yoga black belt or whatever. Like your back posture is probably not what it could be, and that leads to pain and lack of sleep and stress and so on. So if someone makes a Fitbit or some device, or shocks you or does something,
not pleasant.
Yeah,
it's like, oh, I guess.
Or you know, it's an interesting thing. Here's an idea. You know how you wake up in the middle of the night sometimes and your thoughts are racing? So sometimes I'd wake up at 3 a.m. and it's hard to go back to sleep because my thoughts are racing. Well, when your thoughts are racing, it's because blood is flowing to your frontal cortex and your forehead starts to heat up. So what if you wear some kind of very thin band which takes the temperature of your forehead, notices in the middle of the night if it's getting a little too hot, which means maybe you're about to wake up because your thoughts are racing too much, and gets cooler so that your frontal cortex cools down and it avoids your thoughts from racing. Boom.
That's a great idea.
An Internet of Things product, although it's not quite an e-commerce product. I do think e-commerce is going to be like a multi-trillion-dollar industry because almost everything, like a phone. You know, if I turn off and on the phone so many times, eventually the phone dies, and so you'll know you get maybe it automatically gets a new phone for you. But I kind of think owning is going to be a thing of the past in like 10 years. So everything we own will just be, it'll be like a access economy. So, I need a car. Oh, there's a car parked right outside, like a zip car sort of thing that you could drive. Oh, you need an apartment for a month? No problem. There's an apartment available on this street. Kind of like Airbnb, but just a lot more seamless and automated.
Yeah.
So
I think they're going that way.
So what's another e-commerce idea that could be done? Like, let's say, I was thinking of plane tickets, but I don't know. It's hard because I don't really buy many objects. I just buy books, really.
Yeah. No, I'm the one that does forever.
So what's a
I was trying to think what would be, you could just use shampoo, things that run out.
Oh yeah, so everything in the bathroom runs out. So there could be things that monitor that and order.
Right, it has to be monitored through Alexa. I think they're doing that with refrigerators. They're doing that with I don't know, water.
Maybe if like your chair knows your weight, so maybe if suddenly you gain too much weight, it automatically orders you an exercise plan or a gym membership or something like that.
That's pretty sad. The chair's like, hey, you gotta lose some weight.
But anyway, this is all. But that's why it's so hard to ask people for a favor, because all objects, like the interaction in society between people and the objects they own, are different. Like you don't really. I can't think of the last time I borrowed something from anyone except for Jay. So, but asking for something more virtual like advice or an introduction. So, an introduction would be good. You could say to the person, hey, so and so. Any chance you can make an intro for me? I want to put them on my podcast. Or I want to do this favor for them. And so if they make an intro, then suddenly your brain thinks, I'm the type of person who makes an intro for this person.
Or ask him anything, like you said, advice, like, what do you have any good TV shows that you like right now? Or so anytime to just share, you gotta be.
I agree. You gotta be a little careful. You're not pandering. So it's like with the
you have to be sincere about it.
Yeah, like
if you really do want to know.
Because like the TV show Give is not such a great favor. It's got to be like a favor.
I would like to know.
Right.
Because we really want new shows.
Yeah, we have no shows. We just the best sitcom. The best sitcom of the year we just finished, which is Dave on Hulu or FXX, and it stars the rapper Lil Dicky. It stars the comedian Andrew Santino. It's directed by Greg Mottola, who directed Superbad, one of my all-time favorite movies. We need another sitcom. So, but I would say to do the Benjamin Franklin effect now, ask for a favor or ask for advice is the more concrete way to do it. So if you're in a sales meeting, and if someone says no, and I've seen this done, by the way, and it works. If someone says, no, we can't do this, ask them, well, how could I have presented this differently so you would have said yes, just so I know? Or you could say, well, I noticed when I was coming up here, you don't have a lot of software people, but maybe there's some software things you need, and maybe you could tell me how I could improve my software services so I could win your software business, or some advice or some favor like that. I think is the modern way to do the Benjamin Franklin effect. So
That's cool.
Now another question. Here's a good question, I think. I just read the first sentence, so I don't know yet. The first sentence is, I have a question about how I respond to posts on Facebook. Well, I'm an expert at responding to posts on Facebook. I teach, and during the school year, I'm rarely looking at Facebook. But during the summer break, I hear ya, I often look at it. With the state our country and world are in, I feel very charged and passionate about my views. And when I see something that is pro-Trump, racist, or something that needs fact-checked, I go crazy. She says, I think we do have systemic racism. We've always had police brutality. I am a white woman who lives in a very conservative county in central Illinois. I live in a rural area and just feel either angry or despondent every day. It's not just Facebook. It's conversations with family and friends as well. So my question then does include responding to people, whether on social media or in person. That is a really great question, because there's a couple of things you should know. First off, you respond on Twitter, like you'll respond to bots on Twitter and argue with like robots. So I don't know if you have any advice on this.
I mean, you're not going to change anybody's mind. We know that, all right? Key
thing. Point number one, you are not going to change anyone's mind. So you have to think what your goal is. Yeah. Is your goal to make, you have to have, first off, you have to remember a couple things. Let's just make the laws of engagement right now, the rules of engagement in a Twitter war or even in a conversation with your family. Rule number one, you are not going to change their mind. I have the amount of times in my 52 years of living that I've seen someone change their mind because of something I've said is basically zero, particularly if they're, in fact, there's a cognitive bias. There's a cognitive bias called the backlash bias, which is that if someone's very polarized and you argue with them, they will actually become more polarized. They will not say, huh, boy, right. I've talked to 1,000 people about this, but James is right. And I've changed my mind forever. They're never gonna, has that ever happened to you? Raise your hand or put a heart if that's ever happened to you. You're never going to change anyone's mind. But what happens is you'll do the reverse, and you don't want to do this. If you really care about systemic racism and police brutality and a political candidate or whatever, this is very important to remember. If they're polarized, and it sounds like you're dealing with a lot of polarized people, and they only have to be a little bit polarized, just a little bit left of right, right of center or left of center, and that's polarized enough. They will not change their mind. Instead, the backlash effect happens, which is a cognitive bias, where they will take an even stronger stance against you. Like, let's say someone likes Trump, and you give them 55 reasons why they should not like Trump. They might not really be that much for Trump, but now they'll do the backlash effect will kick in, and they'll start arguing against you, and they'll even think to themselves, I'm not even that for Trump, but why am I arguing so strongly pro-Trump? Or why am I arguing so strongly for the police? I'm sure there's police brutality. I agree with this person. Why am I arguing with her? The backlash, it's because the backlash cognitive bias is really strong. And it happens in relationships and marriages. Have you ever been in a relationship where one person is kind of messy, but not really, and the other person's kind of clean, but not really, but then suddenly in the relationship, they go boom, and this person becomes super clean. Why did you leave your sock here? And this person becomes super messy and can't clean anything, just leaves their dishes around and whatever. They become messier than they ever were. In a relationship, it's called splitting the difference. A couple splits the difference, and one person takes over the clean side of the relationship and the other person takes over the messy side of the relationship. That's the backlash effect in practice in relationships. So here's what I would do. So that's rule number one. You won't change their mind. Rule number two is you'll actually trigger the backlash effect, so you'll do the opposite of what you want to do. Rule number three is figure out what your goals are. Rule number three is nobody gives a shit about you. And this is true.
It's true.
And this is not a bad thing. everybody cares first and foremost about their own self-worth. And if you're telling them that they're wrong, their self-worth, if they agree with, this is why the backlash effect happens. If they agree with you, their self-worth goes down a little bit. So they're not gonna, if you don't appease their self-worth, they're gonna just stop listening to you. So you have to decide then what your goals are. There are two goals that are worthwhile. There's a goal of improving yourself, and there's the goal of trying to improve society. By the way, good luck trying to improve society from your house in rural Illinois. Maybe you can do it, but I'll tell you my experience in the past few months. So I have felt very strongly about some aspects of the economy during this lockdown, and I have felt very strongly about systemic racism and when these protests started. So I called and reached out to friends of mine who are very high up in government on both Democrat and Republican side, and I've also reached out to African American leaders who are very prominent and well known, and I said, look, I very strongly, we're on the same side. Here's my ideas for reform. Here's how I think you can get your message across even better than you're already doing, and you're doing it very well, but here's how I think you can get your message across. Even with me, these are my friends who are high up. They have the ability to make decisions in government, in the African American community. They have huge platforms, and they would agree with me. But still, I was not able to have any influence at all. So give up trying to improve the world. You will not do it. Unless you're going to clean the park near where you live, you're not going to improve the world. But what does selflessly improve the world is improving yourself. Yeah. And we already know you're renting out too much mental real estate to anonymous people on Twitter, to anonymous people or people who are barely your friend on Facebook. You would never have, if Facebook didn't exist, you would never have spoken to this friend of yours from third grade who was the bully in third grade. You would have spoken to that person again, and now you're arguing with them all day on Facebook.
But it's also about respecting the other person's opinion. I mean, you can't, always think you may be right and they're right. I mean, so it's okay. I have a lot of friends that have a different, mindset than I do, but I respect their mindset. I mean, I'm not here to change their mind or to, and so we don't really talk about those sort of things. So right. I think it really is about respect. And so what if they have those opinions? That's okay, because we live in the United States. You can have your opinion. You don't have to be so upset or feel like you have to change people.
But that's the challenge.
That's the aggravating part to me, is when people try to do that. It's like, I don't try to do that to other people. I'm only doing it to the bots, because all I do is expose them. That's all I want to do.
For you, it's sport. It's like one time I asked Nassim Taleb, why do you always argue with people on Twitter? And you're really angry at people. And he's like, oh, it's just sport for me. I don't believe that anymore, because I think he's since blocked me. But yeah, I think the challenge is, how can you improve yourself?
Right, just work on yourself.
You can improve yourself by noticing, oh, someone on Facebook said something that made me angry. So I'm going to rise above this and say, I'm going to provide words of hope instead. And make sure, triple check yourself that you're not being political, or you're not trying to persuade, or just try to be neutral and focus on, how can I make this environment, first make yourself better, then you have an obligation to your spouse, your children, your friends, your community. It's concentric circles outwards. How can I, by improving myself, how can I make all these other people better? So maybe I learned something about how to deal with arguing, so I could help my children deal with arguing better. Or maybe I have business partners who disagree with me on very important political issues, and you learn to listen and not judge and not argue, because nobody wakes up and says, boy, I can't wait for police to kill more black people. Nobody says that. So there's no real argument there, but maybe there's arguments and techniques, like, does looting, does rioting help, does an economic lockdown help the pandemic? So there's techniques, and you might disagree with them, but I know for a fact you're not going to be able to influence anyone at all. So the best thing you can do is just
Solutions.
improve yourself.
And solutions too, right?
But no, I pitch solutions. I pitch very hardcore solutions, which they would agree with, but it influences nobody.
Right.
So the best thing I can do is what I wrote about in Choose Yourself, physical health. Did I eat well today, exercise well today, and sleep 8 hours? Emotional health. Am I around toxic people, or am I around people who love me and who I love? Creative health. Did you write your 10 ideas a day down? Because maybe you could write a blog or a book or do a podcast, or you'll have other creative ideas how you can contribute to the community personally to help things. So, but you won't be able to be creative if you're not exercising the creativity muscle. Creative muscles atrophy. So it's you got to write down 10 ideas a day to exercise. And then probably the most important of all, given the question, spiritual health. And that doesn't mean praying or meditating or any of these things. It simply means learning to not try to control the things you can't control. Sure. So, in judo, so judo is sometimes translated as it's this martial art from Japan or whatever, and it's translated as the gentle way. And the reason it's the gentle way is if someone's like lunging at you, they're slightly off balance. The moment they throw the punch, someone's a little off balance, and they're using energy, and they're a little off balance. And the whole idea of judo is to make them use their energy against themselves. So you stand out of the way and you hold their arm, and now they're throwing that energy at an empty space, and they fall, and then you put your leg out and they trip. So the motto of the main guy who started judo, I'm trying to remember his name, Jingoro Kano, his main quote is maximum efficiency, minimum energy. So if you're arguing on Facebook, you're having minimum efficiency, maximum energy. So always keep in mind, if you're trying to control something you can't, you're gonna be doing the opposite of what you should be doing.
It's like a pendulum.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you want to be using minimum energy to have maximum efficiency. You do not want to be using maximum energy to have zero efficiency. So again, the most selfless thing you can do if you find yourself repeatedly in that situation is to improve yourself, improve the people around you, practice your creativity, and not try to control things you can't. I'm sorry to say this because you cannot change anyone. Like, I have a very good friend, a very dear friend, who's pro-life. I'm pro-choice. We've been best friends for 21 years. We talk almost every day, and he puts his life where his words are. He adopts kids. He has foster kids. He helps people who are in difficult situations. I really admire him a lot. We talk about pro-choice and pro-life, but we don't argue because he's religious. He's a religious Catholic. He's not going to change his mind, and I'm not going to change my mind. And we both know that about each other. And because of our friendship, we've had lots of businesses together and made a lot of money together. If we had just argued that first day about pro-choice, neither of us would have made any of the money we've made. So let's see. I think there's time to ask another question, to answer another question. What business ideas do you have for a 51-year-old farmer living in rural Iowa wanting to get off the schneid? I don't know what a schneid is, but I can answer that. So we've talked about a lot of business ideas here on this podcast. So, I could repeat some of them, but you can, listen to old episodes or watch some of the old episodes on Instagram. But I'll come up with some new ones right now. If you're a 51-year-old farmer living in Iowa, then it's a good idea to see what things are trending higher on Google. So you know what's been trending during this period is, so have you ever seen these subscription boxes? So maybe, like you could imagine a men's grooming kit, like razor blades, what's that called? Shaving cream. Yeah, aftershave, cologne, whatever. So you can go to there are different men's sites where you can subscribe every month. Send me a new crate. It's a new box. It's a subscription box. I'll pay $12 a month or $50 a month. Send me a new box with everything I need. But here's what's trending are sex crates. So you put together every month a new batch of sex-related tools to, help a couple improve, keep things exciting, improve their orgasms, whatever. Like, oh, this box is going to be all about S&M. This next box is going to be all about anal. Sorry to be so graphic. This next box is going to be, all about ways to play with, toys to play with each other. So I'm suggesting this as a business to a 51-year-old farmer, but you could set up a crate business, like a sex crate business. Here's another thing that's been trending. Airlines no longer serve alcohol. So cocktail kits, a monthly airline cocktail kit, like where you have miniature bottles of different cocktails, that's actually been trending higher. So that's another type of subscription business.
I have an idea.
Tell me.
Like, he's a farmer. I would look into possibly, I don't know what the laws are for marijuana or cannabis farming, but actually cannabis and what's the other plant? The
hemp.
Hemp is really something that you should look into.
Yeah.
Farming, because it takes less water than cotton. It's healthier for the environment. It doesn't absorb all the minerals. Like cotton takes all the minerals out of the land. I would switch it to a hemp farm or something.
Yeah, so
like
or a cannabis farm.
Or cannabis.
Yeah, because I think hemp you can't get as much THC out of hemp. But
but they're still going to use that for or some of the what do you call it? The when they take the oil out and what's left is, what's the word I'm looking for?
Yeah, the hemp oil.
Yeah, or no, just the plant itself. They are discarding that, and that's something that can be sold and used for horse feed. It could be used for cows, because if they eat that, it's very healthy for them.
Yeah.
So
that's
as a farmer, he could do something like that.
And or here's another thing too, which is that. And here's another thing that's trending. Right now, kids this summer are not going to summer camp. So the typical way that kids swim and have fun in the summer, they go swimming and they go to the pool. Well, public pools aren't going to be open in many states. So guess what's trending on Google? Inflatable pools. That inflatable pools, because they're cheaper than built-in pools. And you could buy an inflatable pool, have it for the summer, have the kids use it. So here's what I would do. Go on Alibaba and search for inflatable pools. I did this, and an inflatable pool costs you about $30 or $40 on Alibaba, made by a Chinese factory. You might have a minimum order of like 100 inflatable pools. The same inflatable pool with the same dimensions will go for $200 or $300 on Amazon. And so you have the space, you have a farm, you can store 100 or 1,000 or whatever it is inflatable pools, start off small, and then set up a store on Shopify, set up a store on Etsy, set up a store on any place where you can set up stores. Set up a Pinterest page, write, about pools or whatever, and try to buy inflatable pools on Alibaba and sell them on Amazon. You can make $100 a pool maybe, even including all the shipping costs. So these are some basic ideas. I've given lots of ideas, like you could be a virtual assistant, you could write books, you could do a newsletter. I do think the absolute best business model out there right now is subscription newsletters or even advertising-based newsletters. Oh, but here's the other thing. If you're 51 and you have a farm, you might have a few $1,000s extra cash that you use for investing. Go to flippa.com, FLIPPA.com, and there's all these e-commerce websites for sale, and they're usually for sale for less than 2 times what you make per year. And you can even I was talking to one guy the other day. He just bought his first, after hearing me talk about it on Instagram Live, he bought his first e-commerce website. He put no money down because he worked out a deal with the owner that'll pay them. He'll pay the old owner, out of profits over the next 2 or 3 years. And he bought some website for free, and it looks great. So look at flippa.com, and you can see, the best businesses, the best way to ensure you won't fail is to buy an already existing successful business.
Also, community farming. You can maybe open up your farm to allow people to take a block and farm, you know, their own food or something. I'm just trying to think of if he has land, he can.
Yeah, that could be as well. And but definitely,
bees. You can.
Yeah.
A bee farm.
You could create an online course.